John sat at the dining table with his wife Mary. The table had only a small bowl of rice, not enough for 2 people. Mary looked at the rice and then at her husband. She had not eaten since morning and her stomach made a sound. She hoped John would share the food with her. John picked up the spoon and started eating without looking at Mary. She waited, thinking he would leave some for her, but he ate every single grain. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and stood up. Mary said, "John, I am hungry. You could have left something for me." John looked at her with no care. He said, "If you are hungry, go and find your own food. I work for this money, not you." His words were sharp. Mary felt pain in her heart. She worked at home every day, cleaning, washing, and making sure John had a neat place to stay. Yet John did not respect her. She lowered her head and stayed quiet. John went to the bedroom, changed his clothes, and wore a strong perfume. He looked at himself in the mirror and smiled. He was not worried about Mary. He had plans that night. He picked up his car keys and walked out of the house. Mary sat on the chair still hungry. She whispered to herself, "One day your actions will return to you." She had no strength to argue. John drove to another part of town. He was going to see Linda, his side chick. Linda was younger, very beautiful, and always dressed in a way that pleased John. He liked being with her because she treated him with sweet words and respect, unlike Mary, who always complained about food and care. When John reached Linda's apartment, she welcomed him with a smile. She hugged him and said, "Baby, I cooked your favorite meal. Come inside and eat." John followed her happily, thinking he was the luckiest man alive. Linda placed a plate of hot stew and meat before him. The smell filled the room. John sat down and started eating with speed. Linda sat opposite him and watched him eat. She smiled, but there was something dark in her eyes. As John ate, he did not know that the food he was swallowing carried poison. Linda had mixed it with her own hands earlier. She kept smiling at him, pretending everything was fine. John laughed as he ate. "Linda, you know me well. This food tastes so good. My wife cannot give me this kind of peace." Linda looked at him and said softly, "Eat well, John. This will be the last meal you enjoy in your life." John looked up at her confused. He laughed again, not taking her words seriously. But inside Linda's mind, the plan was already working. John finished eating the food Linda served. He leaned back on the chair, holding his stomach with both hands. At first it felt like he was simply full, but soon the feeling changed. His stomach started to tighten in a strange way. Linda stood up and cleared the empty plate from the table. She moved slowly and kept looking at John. She wanted to see the first sign that her plan was working. Her heart was beating fast, but she did not show it. John said, "Linda, this food is heavy. I feel a little strange. Maybe I ate too fast." He tried to laugh, but the sound was weak. He pressed his stomach again and looked at Linda. Linda smiled calmly. She said, "You should rest. Maybe your body is just tired from work." Her voice was soft, but inside her mind she was waiting for the poison to spread. John tried to stand up, but his legs felt weak. He sat down again quickly. His hands started to shake and sweat came out of his forehead. He wiped his face with a cloth, but the sweat kept coming. He looked at Linda with confusion. "What is happening to me? My body feels hot. I cannot see clearly." His voice was louder this time and fear was growing inside him. Linda walked closer and touched his shoulder. She looked him in the eye and said, "Maybe now you understand what it feels like to suffer. You leave your wife at home hungry while you come here to eat. You think nobody is watching you, but everything has a price." John's eyes opened wide. He pushed her hand away and shouted, "What do you mean? What did you put in the food?" His voice shook as he spoke. Linda stepped back and folded her arms. She said, "The same food you love so much has become your punishment. You thought you were smart, but today you will see that betrayal has an end." John tried to stand up again, but his legs gave way and he fell to the floor. He held his throat as if something was blocking his breath. His eyes rolled and his body trembled. Linda watched him struggle. She felt no pity. For months she had planned this moment. She knew John was never serious about her. He only used her for pleasure and money. She had heard that he was telling other men that she was only a side chick and nothing more. She wanted revenge, and this was her way. John lay on the floor gasping for air. His voice was weak as he said, "Linda, help me. Please call a doctor." But Linda did not move. She stood still, her face hard. She said, "You left your wife hungry. Now you will taste hunger for life itself." John's body continued to shake as the poison spread. The room was silent except for his gasping sound. The night that started with joy was turning into his worst nightmare. John lay on the floor gasping for air. His body was sweating heavily and his shirt was wet. He tried to lift himself but his arms were weak. He dragged his body across the floor hoping to reach the door. Linda stood near the table and watched. She made no move to help him. Her eyes were cold and her hands were steady. She had waited for this day. She wanted him to feel pain the way she felt pain when he used her and mocked her behind her back. John cried out, "Linda, please, help me. I swear I will give you everything you want. Money, car, anything. Just call the hospital." His voice cracked and his words came out slowly. Linda walked closer and bent down near him. She said, "John, I don't want your money. I don't want your car. I wanted your respect but you never gave it. You used me like I was nothing. Now you will understand that life is not a game." John's eyes were red and his mouth was shaking. He coughed and some foam appeared on his lips. He dragged himself a little more and touched the bottom of the door with his fingers. He tried to open it but his strength failed him. His hand slipped and he fell back to the floor. Linda picked up her phone and pretended to dial a number. John's face lit up with hope. He thought she was calling an ambulance. He tried to say thank you but his voice was too weak. Linda looked at him and then dropped the phone back on the table. She said, "No one is coming to save you. Tonight only you and I are here. You gave your wife hunger and now hunger for life is taking you." John's breathing grew heavier. His heart was beating so fast that he could hear it in his ears. He thought of Mary, his wife. He remembered her face when she begged for food earlier that evening. He had ignored her. Now, lying on the floor, he realized she was the only one who truly cared for him. Tears came out of John's eyes. He whispered, "Mary, forgive me. I was wrong." His voice was fading and his body was losing strength. Linda shook her head. She said, "It is too late for forgiveness. You gave up love for pleasure. You gave up loyalty for lies. You will not escape the price tonight." John tried one last time to crawl to the door. His nails scratched the floor, leaving marks. His legs refused to move. His chest burned and his sight grew dark. He lay still for a moment, breathing hard. Linda sat on the chair and crossed her legs. She looked at him like a judge watching a criminal face judgment. She was calm, waiting for the poison to finish its work. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. John's life was slipping away with each sound. The night was no longer in his control. John's breathing grew weaker, but his survival instinct pushed him to fight. With all his remaining strength, he pressed his palms against the floor and forced his body upward. His arms shook like dry sticks about to break, but somehow he got to his knees. Linda looked at him with a small smile. She did not move to stop him. She wanted to see how far he could go before the poison took full control. Her arms were folded, and her eyes followed him like a hunter watching wounded prey. John leaned against the wall and pulled himself up. His legs trembled and sweat ran down his face. He reached for the door handle and twisted it with a shaky hand. The door opened slowly and for a moment, John felt a burst of hope. He staggered into the hallway. His steps were heavy, and his shoes dragged against the floor. His breathing sounded like a man drowning. He whispered, "Help, help me," but his voice was too low to travel far. Linda followed him at a slow pace. She did not rush. She knew he could not get far. The poison was already in his blood, moving fast. She leaned against the wall, watching him stumble forward. John reached the stairwell. He held the railing tightly as his vision blurred. He tried to shout again, "Somebody, please?" His voice cracked, but this time one of the neighbors upstairs heard a faint sound. A door opened and a young man stepped out. He looked down the stairwell and saw John leaning weakly against the rail. The man shouted, "Are you okay, sir?" John tried to nod, but his legs gave way and he fell down 2 steps. He groaned in pain and reached his hand upward, begging for help. Linda quickly stepped forward and called up to the neighbor. She said, "Don't worry, he is fine. He just drank too much tonight. I am taking him back inside." Her voice was calm but firm, leaving no room for questions. The young neighbor hesitated. He looked again at John, who was sweating and shaking. But Linda held John's arm and pulled him upright. She said loudly, "Thank you, we can handle it." Then she forced John back toward the apartment. John tried to resist, but his strength was gone. His head fell on Linda's shoulder as she dragged him step by step. He whispered, "Please, no, doctor." His words faded into broken breaths. Linda pulled him back into the room and shut the door quickly. She locked it with a firm click. She looked down at him and said coldly, "You thought you could escape? No, John. Tonight there is no escape. You will face the end right here, in the same place you laughed at your wife's hunger." John collapsed on the floor again, his chest rising and falling slowly. The outside world was so close, but he had been pulled back into the trap. The chance for rescue was gone. Linda sat back on the chair. She crossed her arms and watched him suffer. The poison was in full control now. Time was running out for John. John lay flat on the floor again. His breathing was loud and uneven, his chest moving up and down as if it would break apart. His hands shook uncontrollably and his lips were dry. The poison was spreading fast and he knew he did not have much time. Linda sat on the chair with her arms crossed. She looked down at him with no pity. Her face was calm but her eyes were sharp. She wanted to hear what he would say before the poison finished him. John tried to lift his head. His voice was weak but the words still came out. Linda, please. I beg you. I don't want to die. Call a doctor. Call anyone. I will do anything you ask. Linda shook her head slowly. She said, It's too late, John. The same way you refuse to care for your wife, I will not care for you. You let her go hungry and now you are the one hungry for life. That is your punishment. John's eyes filled with tears. He coughed and more foam came out of his mouth. He whispered, I know I treated Mary badly. She begged me tonight and I ignored her. I laughed at her pain. Now I see. I was wrong. Linda leaned forward. She said, And yet you still came here, smiling, eating and mocking your wife. You never respected anyone. John closed his eyes for a moment. He saw Mary's face in his mind. He remembered the time she waited for him with food, the time she asked him to sit with her, the time she begged him to change. He had pushed her away every time. His voice shook as he said, Mary, I should have listened to you. You gave me love but I gave you pain. I see it now. I wish I could tell you sorry. I wish I could go back. Linda tapped her fingers on the table. She said, Sorry does not change the past. Your wife cried alone while you laughed with me. Your end is fair. John looked up at her, his eyes wide. But you, Linda, you said you loved me. Why poison me if you loved me? His words came out broken but he wanted to understand. Linda's face turned hard. She said, I loved you, yes. But you never loved me. You told your friends I was just a side chick. You said I was nothing. You used me for your pleasure and then you wanted to throw me away. That is why you are on this floor. That is why you are dying. John coughed again. His body shook and he held his stomach. He whispered, So this is the end of me? Betrayed by the one I trusted, punished for the wife I abandoned. His tears ran down his cheeks. Linda said, This is not betrayal, John. This is justice. Tonight, your actions caught up with you. John closed his eyes again. His breathing was shallow. He whispered one last time, Mary, forgive me. The room was quiet except for the sound of the clock ticking. Each tick was a reminder that John's life was running out. Mary sat alone in the small living room. The house was dark and only a dim light from the window lit the space. Her stomach still hurt from hunger, but her heart hurt even more. She thought about how John had eaten in front of her earlier and left her with nothing. She sat with her hands on her lap, staring at the wall. Tears rolled down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, Maybe I married the wrong man. Maybe God is punishing me. Her voice was soft and broken. Suddenly her phone rang. She picked it up slowly, expecting it to be one of her friends or family members. Instead, it was a strange number. She hesitated before answering. Hello, she said weakly. A man's voice came through. It was the same young neighbor who had seen John earlier in the stairwell. He said, Madam, are you John's wife? Mary sat up straight. Yes, I am. What happened? The man said, I saw your husband tonight. He looked very sick. He was sweating, shaking, and could barely stand. A woman with him said he was fine, but I don't believe her. I think something is wrong. Mary's heart raced. She asked quickly, Which woman? Where did you see him? The man said, It was in an apartment downtown. I don't know her name, but she was with him. She took him back inside. I wanted to call the police, but she locked the door. That's why I called you instead. Mary's hands shook as she held the phone. Her worst fear had come true. John was not only unfaithful, but now he was in danger because of it. She swallowed hard and said, Thank you for telling me. Please send me the address. The man sent the location. Mary grabbed her bag and stood up quickly. She did not even care that she had not eaten. Her worry for John was stronger than her hunger. She rushed outside and found a taxi. As the car drove her to the address, her mind was full of thoughts. She remembered all the nights John came home late, smelling of another woman's perfume. She remembered all the times she cried when he ignored her. And yet, even with all his betrayal, her heart still cared. She whispered to herself, "John, why are you doing this to me? Why do you choose another woman over me? But even if you hate me, I cannot let you die like this. I will not." The taxi stopped in front of Linda's building. Mary stepped out and looked up at the apartment. The lights were still on. Her heart pounded as she climbed the stairs. She reached the door and knocked hard. Inside, Linda looked at John, who was lying weak on the floor. She heard the knock and frowned. She whispered, "Who could that be?" Mary knocked again, louder this time. "Open this door," she shouted. Her voice was filled with anger and fear. Linda froze. She looked down at John, who barely moved, and then at the door. The night was about to change again. Linda stood still for a moment, listening to the knocking at the door. She had not expected anyone. Her plan was to watch John suffer until the end, but now someone was outside, disturbing her calm. The knocking grew louder, followed by Mary's sharp voice. "Open this door right now," Mary shouted. John, still lying on the floor, weakly turned his head. His eyes widened when he heard Mary's voice. With the last bit of strength he had, he whispered, "Mary?" His voice was so low that it barely reached Linda's ears. Linda clenched her teeth. She walked slowly to the door and opened it just enough to see who was there. When she saw Mary standing firmly, her face filled with shock. She had not expected John's wife to come here. Mary pushed her way in without waiting for an invitation. She looked around the room quickly. Then her eyes fell on John lying on the floor, his face pale, his lips foaming and his body shaking. She gasped and rushed toward him. "What happened to him?" Mary cried as she knelt beside John. She tried to lift his head onto her lap. Her eyes filled with tears as she touched his sweaty face. "John, talk to me. What did this woman do to you?" Linda crossed her arms and stood behind her. Her voice was cold and steady. "Don't pretend you care, Mary. He never respected you. He never loved you. Why act like the good wife now?" Mary looked up sharply at Linda. Her eyes burned with anger. "Shut your mouth. You think because he was weak enough to follow you, you have power over him? You poisoned him, didn't you? Tell me the truth." Linda smirked. "Yes, I poisoned him. He deserves it. He used me, laughed at me, and treated me like nothing. And he left you hungry while he sat here eating. Don't you see? He is a selfish man. Why save him?" Mary held John's hand tightly. His grip was weak, but she could still feel it. She shouted at Linda, "Because he is my husband. Yes, he hurt me. Yes, he betrayed me. But that does not give you the right to kill him. You will not decide when his life ends." Linda laughed lightly, shaking her head. "You are a fool, Mary. You should thank me for doing what you were too weak to do. He made you cry every night. He treated you like dirt. I'm giving you freedom." Mary stood up suddenly, leaving John on the floor for a moment. She walked right up to Linda, her finger pointing in her face. "Freedom? This is murder. You are nothing but a coward hiding behind poison. You think this makes you powerful? No. It makes you evil." Linda's smile disappeared. Her face turned hard and she said, "If you want to save him, go ahead. But I promise you it is already too late." Mary turned back to John, tears streaming down her face. She lifted him up slightly and whispered, "Hold on, John. I am here. You will not die like this. Not in her hands." Linda watched them closely, her eyes sharp. The room was full of tension and every second felt like fire. Mary held John's head on her lap. His eyes were half closed and his body was shaking. She pressed her hand against his chest and whispered, "Stay with me, John. Please don't leave me like this." Her tears dropped on his face. She quickly reached for her phone and dialed the emergency number. But before she could press the call button, Linda rushed forward and slapped the phone out of her hand. It fell to the floor with a loud crack. Mary gasped. "What are you doing? He will die if I don't call for help." Linda glared at her. "That is the point. He has to die tonight. No ambulance, no hospital. His time is finished." Mary bent down to grab her phone, but Linda kicked it across the room. It slid under the chair. Mary's heart raced. She looked at Linda with fury and shouted, "You cannot stop me. I will save him even if it costs me my life." Linda laughed bitterly. "Save him? The same man who left you starving at home? The same man who threw his love to the ground? Don't be a fool, Mary. Let him die. He deserves it." Mary stood up, her fists clenched. "No. I may be hungry, but I am not heartless. I married him, I gave him my vows, and I will not abandon him when death comes. If you had even a little humanity, you would understand." Linda's face twisted with anger. She pushed Mary hard against the wall. Mary groaned but stood her ground. She pushed Linda back with all her strength. The two women stared at each other, breathing heavily, like two fighters in a ring. John groaned weakly from the floor. He lifted his hand slightly and whispered, "Mary, help me." His voice was almost gone. Mary's eyes widened. She turned back to him and shouted at Linda, "Do you hear that? Even now when he cannot stand he calls my name. Not yours. Mine. Because no matter what, I am his wife. And I will not let you steal his last breath." Linda froze for a moment, her jaw tight. The words cut her deeply. She had always known John never truly loved her, but hearing it now broke her inside. Her anger grew stronger. She walked to the table and picked up a sharp kitchen knife. Mary's eyes widened. She pulled John closer to her. "Are you going to kill me too? Is that what you want? Go ahead then. But I swear if I die here, the world will know what you did." Linda held the knife in her hand, shaking. Her breath was heavy. She wanted to scare Mary, but her hand trembled. Deep inside, she knew killing Mary would not erase the truth. John loved Mary more than her, even in his dying moment. Mary used that second of hesitation. She rushed to grab her phone from under the chair, pressed the emergency number and screamed into it, "Help! My husband has been poisoned. Send an ambulance now." Linda's eyes widened in shock. She dropped the knife and shouted, "No!" But it was too late. Mary had called for help. Mary knelt beside John, still clutching her phone. She cried into the receiver, giving the apartment address in a shaking voice. The operator promised that help was on the way. Mary dropped the phone and held John tightly. "Hold on, John. The ambulance is coming. Just a little more." Linda paced the room like a trapped animal. Her plan was ruined. She held her head with both hands, her breathing fast. She muttered, "No, no, no. This was not supposed to happen. He was supposed to die quietly here. Not like this." Mary glared at her. "You thought you could hide forever? Tonight the truth will come out. Everyone will know what you did." Minutes later, sirens wailed outside. The flashing lights of an ambulance filled the window. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Two paramedics burst through the door with a stretcher. Behind them, the young neighbor who had called Mary followed, looking shocked. The paramedics rushed to John. They checked his pulse and opened their emergency kit. One of them said, "Severe poisoning. We need to move him now." They lifted him gently onto the stretcher. John groaned weakly, his eyes barely open, but he was still alive. Mary held his hand tightly as they worked. She cried, "Please save him. Don't let him die." The young neighbor pointed at Linda. "That's the woman I told you about. She was with him. She said he was fine, but look at him." She lied. Linda's face went pale. She stepped back, shaking her head. "No, it's not what you think. He was already sick. I tried to help him. This is not my fault." Mary stood up, her eyes full of fire. She pointed at Linda and shouted, "She poisoned him. I saw it in her eyes when I walked in. She admitted it to me. She wanted him dead." The room grew tense. The neighbor looked at Linda with shock. The paramedics glanced at each other but continued working on John. One of them said, "We need the police here too. This looks serious." He picked up his radio and called for backup. Linda's body shook. She stepped closer to Mary, her voice trembling. "You think you've won, don't you? You think saving him will make him love you again? He never respected you. He used you just like he used me." Mary stood firm. "Maybe he failed me, maybe he betrayed me. But I never wished him dead. That is the difference between you and me." The neighbor blocked Linda's path. "Stay where you are. The police will handle this." Moments later, two police officers entered the apartment. They looked at John on the stretcher, then at Mary holding his hand, and finally at Linda standing frozen by the wall. One officer said, "Who poisoned this man?" Mary pointed at Linda without hesitation. "She did." Linda's mouth opened, but no words came. The knife she had dropped earlier still lay on the floor, and the officer's eyes caught it immediately. One officer stepped forward, pulled Linda's hands behind her back, and snapped the handcuffs on. Linda screamed, "No. You don't understand. He deserved it. He left his wife hungry and laughed about it. He deserved this." The officers dragged her toward the door. Mary looked at her one last time and said, "You are right about one thing, Linda. Actions have consequences. But you don't get to play God." The paramedics carried John out on the stretcher. Mary followed closely, her tears still flowing but her grip firm on his hand. The ambulance sped through the night, sirens wailing. Mary sat beside John, holding his weak hand. His eyes fluttered open for a few seconds. He looked at her and whispered, "Mary, I am sorry." His voice was faint but clear enough for her to hear. Mary bent closer. "Save your strength. You will be okay. Just hold on." She wiped his sweaty face with her scarf as tears rolled down her cheeks. The paramedics worked quickly, giving him oxygen and preparing an injection to slow the poison. One of them said, "He still has a chance if we get him treated fast." Those words gave Mary a little hope. At the same time, Linda sat in the back of a police car outside the apartment building. Her hands were cuffed tightly. She kept shouting, "He deserved it. He played with both of us. He left his wife hungry and came to me like a king. Men like him deserve to die." The officers ignored her. At the hospital, doctors rushed John into the emergency room. Mary was left waiting in the hallway, pacing back and forth, praying under her breath. Hours passed slowly. Finally, a doctor came out. His face was serious but calm. "He is alive," the doctor said. "The poison was strong, but because he was brought in quickly, we managed to flush most of it out. He is still weak, but he will recover." Mary broke down in tears, this time with relief. "Thank you, doctor. Thank you." The next morning, John lay in a hospital bed with tubes in his arm. His face was pale, but he was awake. Mary sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his. He turned his head slowly to look at her. "Mary," he whispered, his eyes filled with regret. "I was blind. I treated you like nothing. I left you hungry while I ran after lies. I nearly lost my life because of my own foolishness. Please forgive me." Mary looked at him quietly for a long moment. Then she said, "John, you broke me many times. You left me alone when I needed you most. But seeing you like this, I realize something. Life is short and betrayal only destroys everyone. If you are truly ready to change, I will not abandon you." John's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly. "I will change. I swear." Meanwhile, news spread about Linda's arrest. Neighbors whispered about the scandal. The police confirmed she would face charges for attempted murder. Her face, once smiling with fake sweetness, was now filled with anger and shame as she sat behind bars. The twist came in the courtroom weeks later. Linda confessed everything, but the judge pointed out the bitter irony. Her act of revenge did not kill John but instead saved his marriage. The poisoning forced John to face his betrayal and gave Mary the strength to stand up for herself. Linda was sentenced to prison. John returned home with Mary after his recovery. This time Mary cooked and John ate quietly, grateful for every bite. The same man who once left his wife hungry now could not lift a spoon without thanking her. The lesson was clear. Betrayal may bring pleasure for a moment, but it always brings pain in the end. And for John, the wife he ignored was the only one who stood by him when death was at his door.
The end.
Thank you for watching the video to the end. If you find this video interesting, do well to hit the subscription button, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell for new stories.